My detective past was buried under the quiet hum of a floor buffer, a secret I kept close. Until one night, a vandal's crime unearthed more than just evidence. It unearthed an impossible choice between justice and loyalty. The squeak of my cart's wheels is a rhythm I've come to appreciate. It's a lonely sound, echoing through the cavernous hallways of Northwood High after the last bell has rung, and the chaos has subsided. For most people, a school at night is creepy. For me, it's peace. It's quiet. For 30 years, my world was sirens, shouting, and the low, guttural sounds of human misery. Now, it's the gentle hum of the floor buffer and the smell of lemon-scented disinfectant. I traded a detective's shield for a set of master keys, and I've never slept better. My name is Frank, and I'm the night janitor. That's all anyone here needs to know. They see an old man, maybe 65, with a bit of a stoop and hands gnarled from work. They don't see the man who could read a crime scene like a children's book, who could spot a lie in the twitch of an eye from 20 feet away. And that's just the way I like it. Here, the biggest mystery is usually who put gum under the desks in the history room. It's a simple life. Tonight was like any other Tuesday. I'd finished the West Wing, the lockers standing like silent metal soldiers in the dim emergency lighting. I was making my way towards the cafeteria, my cart rattling ahead of me with its cargo of mops and spray bottles. The silence was absolute, a thick, comforting blanket. That's why the first sound was so jarring. It wasn't a school sound. It was a sharp, percussive crack from the direction of the arts wing. It sounded like a frozen branch snapping, but we were in the middle of a warm October. My body reacted before my mind did. The janitor, Frank, would have grumbled and gone to investigate a possible faulty pipe. But Detective Miller, the man I'd tried to bury, took over. My hand stopped the cart, silencing the squeaking wheels. My posture straightened. My breathing became slow and deliberate. I slipped into the shadows of the main corridor, my rubber-soled shoes making no sound on the polished linoleum. Every sense was on fire. I wasn't Frank the janitor anymore. I was hunting. I moved along the wall, using the rows of lockers as cover. Another sound reached me. Laughter. Low, muffled, but full of that particular brand of teenage arrogance that thinks it's invincible. Then came the unmistakable hiss of a spray can. My jaw tightened. This wasn't a burst pipe. This was vandalism. I felt a familiar cold anger begin to simmer in my gut. This school, this quiet sanctuary of mine, was being violated. I rounded the corner to the arts wing, and the smell hit me. Not just the acrid scent of spray paint, but something else. Cheap beer. Great. Drunk kids with spray cans. A recipe for stupidity. I peered down the long hallway. The display cases that usually held student sculptures and pottery were shattered, glass glittering like deadly frost on the floor. The walls, once covered in vibrant murals and paintings, were now being defaced with crude symbols and profane insults aimed at teachers I knew and respected. There were 4 of them, all dressed in dark hoodies, their faces obscured by ski masks. They moved with a destructive energy, kicking over trash cans, spraying long, ugly streaks of black and red paint over student artwork. One of them, clearly the ringleader from his body language, took a baseball bat to the main trophy case by the art room door. The sound of shattering glass echoed like a gunshot in the silent school. Trophies for debate teams, state track championships, academic decathlons. Decades of student achievement turned into a pile of broken plastic and splintered wood in seconds. I stayed in the shadows, my heart pounding a steady, cold rhythm. The rookie cop in me, the one who existed 40 years ago, would have charged in, shouting, trying to be a hero. But the seasoned detective knew better. Confrontation was messy and unpredictable. Evidence was clean. Evidence was forever. I didn't need to stop them. I needed to catch them. So I watched. I memorized their builds, their shoes, the way they moved. The short, stocky one had a specific brand of skate shoes with bright green laces. The tall, lanky one had a nervous twitch, constantly looking over his shoulder. The one with the bat was pure aggression. But the leader, he was different. He was calm, deliberate. He orchestrated the chaos. He pointed to a large prize-winning painting of the school's founder and directed one of his cronies to spray a mustache on it. They thought they were invisible, shrouded by masks and darkness. They thought they were ghosts, leaving nothing but chaos in their wake. For 15 minutes I catalogued their every move, every tag they sprayed, every piece of school property they destroyed. My mind was already building the case file, linking the evidence, creating a web. They were sloppy, leaving behind footprints in the spilled paint, a discarded beer can, fingerprints all over the cans of spray paint they'd eventually toss aside. Amateurs. Then the leader did something that made the detective inside me smile a grim, predatory smile. He pulled out his phone. He walked over to the main wall where they had sprayed a massive, obscene caricature of Principal Thompson. He wanted to commemorate his masterpiece. He gestured for his friends to gather around. For a brief, insane moment, he pulled his mask down to his chin, a smirk plastered across his face, and held the phone up to take a group selfie in front of their handiwork. In that single, blinding flash from the phone's camera, the kid didn't just illuminate his own smug face. He illuminated the faces of his friends, the unique tear in the shoulder of his hoodie, and the distinctive silver ring on his index finger. He didn't just take a picture. He signed his and his friends' confessions with a stupid, arrogant grin. And he had no idea he'd just posed for a retired homicide detective who never, ever forgot a face. The flash faded, replaced by the giddy, adrenaline-fueled laughter of fools. They admired their work for another minute, high-fiving each other, the one with the bat kicking a final defiant dent into a locker door. Then, as quickly as they had appeared, they were gone, melting back into the night through a fire exit they'd propped open at the end of the hall. The heavy door clicked shut behind them, and the silence that rushed back in was heavy, accusatory. It was no longer peaceful. I waited a full 5 minutes listening. Only when I was certain they were gone did I push my cart out from the shadows. The squeaking wheels sounded obscenely loud in the violated space. I pulled a pair of thick, latex cleaning gloves from my cart standard issue for a janitor, perfect for an investigator. The scene was a mess, but to my eyes it was a roadmap of their idiocy. They thought masks and darkness made them anonymous. They were wrong. Anonymity is a myth. Everyone leaves a piece of themselves behind. I started at their entry point, the propped open fire exit. There were scuff marks on the floor, but more importantly, outside on the damp grass there were tire tracks. A single set, deeply rutted in the soft earth. I made a mental note of the tread pattern: aggressive, off-road, not the kind of tires you see on a teenager's first sedan. This was a truck, or a big SUV. Back inside, I moved slowly through the arts wing. The beer can the leader had discarded was a premium microbrew, not the cheap stuff most kids drink. An expensive taste. I used a clean rag from my cart to carefully pick it up and place it in an empty trash bag, sealing it off. That was for forensics. I photographed the footprints in the spilled paint with my old, non-smart phone. The resolution was terrible, but it was enough to capture the unique logos on the soles. The skater shoes with the star pattern, the basketball sneakers with the waffle tread, a gallery of suspects. They had been careless near the main teacher's desk in the art room, which they'd ransacked. Papers were strewn everywhere. But amongst the scattered pencils and brushes, something caught my eye. It was small and black, a little plastic triangle, a custom guitar pick. On one side was the snarling wolf logo of a local band, Fenrir's Bite, a metal group that played at a bar downtown. On the other side were the initials JB. It was a tiny, insignificant piece of trash to anyone else. To me, it was a business card. For the next 2 hours, I did my job. I cleaned. But I cleaned like a detective. I swept up the large, dangerous shards of glass. But I left the fine, dust-like particles for the real CSI team. I mopped the floors, carefully preserving the clearest footprints by mopping around them, making it look like I'd just done a sloppy job. I documented everything, every tag, every bit of damage, my mind a whirring filing cabinet of details. By the time the sun started to hint at the horizon, the worst of the immediate danger was gone, but the evidence, the important stuff, was perfectly preserved beneath a thin veneer of a janitor's half-hearted attempt to clean up. The first teacher to arrive was Mrs. Gable, the art teacher. Her gasp was a raw, wounded sound. Then came the shouting, the phone calls. Principal Thompson arrived, his face a mask of thunderous fury. And then finally the police, a single squad car rolled up, and a young officer I vaguely recognized, Davis, stepped out. He looked barely old enough to shave, his eyes wide as he took in the carnage. I played my part. I was Frank, the shaken night janitor. I leaned on my broom, looking exhausted and helpless. "It's awful, officer," I mumbled, shaking my head. "Never seen anything like it. I was in the West Wing, didn't hear a thing until it was too late." "Did you see anyone? Any cars?" Davis asked, his pen poised over his notepad. "No, sir, nothing. But they must have come from the back. The fire exit by the soccer field was propped open." I pointed him in the right direction. When he went to inspect the can I'd bagged, I shuffled over. "Found that, officer. Didn't want to touch it with my bare hands. Figured you fellas might want to look at it." He thanked me, his expression a mixture of gratitude and pity for the old janitor. I was just a piece of the scenery to him, and that was exactly what I wanted. Later that day, after giving my official, useless statement, I retreated to the quiet sanctuary of my basement office. It was a small, windowless room with a desk, a locker, and shelves filled with cleaning supplies, and, tucked away in a dusty box, a collection of Northwood High yearbooks going back a decade. I'd started collecting them my first year here. It paid to know the faces. I pulled out this year's edition. I didn't need to look long. The face from the phone flash, the smug, arrogant smirk, was burned into my memory. There he was, on page 87, in the picture for the varsity lacrosse team. Kyle Markinson, a senior, captain of the team, son of one of the town's wealthiest real estate developers. It all fit. The expensive beer, the attitude of untouchable privilege. I felt a grim satisfaction. The case was already closing in my mind. The face, the truck, the guitar pick belonging to his friend JB, probably Josh Bell, the team's goalie, and a known wannabe musician. It was all falling into place. But something about the name Markinson was scratching at the back of my mind. It was familiar. Too familiar. I put the yearbook down and pulled out one from 4 years ago. I flipped not to the student pictures, but to the faculty and PTA section in the back. My breath caught in my throat. There, in the group photo for the Parent-Teacher Association fundraising committee, was a man I knew as well as I knew myself. He had his arm around a younger Kyle. The man was smiling, the same confident smile he always had. It was the smile of my old partner, the man who had my back in a dozen firefights, the best detective I ever knew before he retired to a cushy private security job. Sergeant David Markinson. My blood ran cold. The arrogant, destructive punk who had led the charge to destroy my school was my best friend's son. The face in the old yearbook photo stared back at me, a ghost from a life I had purposefully left behind. Dave Markinson, my partner. We'd been through hell together, dragged each other out of situations that should have left us dead or in a psych ward. We'd shared greasy diner breakfasts at 3 a.m. and watched each other's kids grow up at backyard barbecues. When my wife passed, he was the one who sat with me in silence for hours, not offering platitudes, just being there. He was my brother in everything but blood, and his son Kyle was a felon. My quiet janitor's office suddenly felt like a cage. The smell of bleach and floor wax was suffocating. For the first time in years, the old world crashed into the new one, and I felt the weight of both. My instinct, the cold, hard wiring of Detective Miller, was screaming at me. Evidence is evidence. A crime is a crime. The kid's name doesn't change the facts. But the part of me that was just Frank, the old man who remembered holding a baby Kyle in his arms, was in turmoil. I could burn the evidence. I could forget what I saw. I could tell Officer Davis my memory was foggy, that the face in the flash was just a blur. Dave would never have to know his son was leading a pack of entitled brats on a path to a felony conviction. I could save him from that heartbreak, from the shame. But what about the school? What about Mrs. Gable, whose prize student sculptures were now just glittering dust on the floor? What about the other kids, the ones who would have to see that vile graffiti every day until it was painted over? Justice wasn't supposed to have a friends and family discount. I spent the rest of the day in a haze, mechanically pushing my broom, My mind a war zone. Every squeak of my cart's wheels sounded like an accusation. By the time my shift ended and the morning sun streamed through the school's main entrance, I had made my decision. It tasted like ash in my mouth, but it was the only one I could live with. I couldn't protect Kyle, but maybe, just maybe, I could protect Dave from the worst of the fallout. I went home, showered, and put on a clean shirt. I didn't go to the police station. Instead, I drove my old pickup truck to a manicured subdivision on the other side of town, to a 2-story brick colonial that screamed private security money. I walked up the stone pathway and rang the bell. Dave answered the door himself, a coffee mug in his hand. He broke into a wide, familiar grin when he saw me. "Frankie, what the hell are you doing here? Don't you know retired guys are supposed to be sleeping at this hour?" He looked good. The stress of the force was gone from his face, replaced by the easy confidence of a man who had made it. It made what I had to do even harder. "Dave," I said, my voice flatter than I intended. "We need to talk." His smile faltered, the old cop senses kicking in. He saw the look in my eyes and knew this wasn't a social call. He ushered me inside, into a spacious kitchen that looked like it was pulled from a magazine. "What's wrong?" He asked, his voice low and serious. I didn't beat around the bush. I laid it all out. The vandalism at the high school, the shattered trophies, the spray paint, the selfie. And then, the hardest part. It was Kyle, Dave. He was leading them. The color drained from his face. The coffee mug slipped from his fingers, shattering on the pristine tile floor. He didn't even seem to notice. He just stared at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and horror. "No," he whispered. "No, you're mistaken. Kyle wouldn't. He's a good kid. Captain of the lacrosse team. He's got scholarship offers." "He was there, Dave," I said, my own voice cracking. "I saw him, clear as day." I told him about the expensive beer, the specific hoodie, the ring on his finger. I didn't tell him about the guitar pick or the tire tracks. I held that back. I gave him just enough to know I was sure, but not enough to show him the full, airtight nature of the case I had built in my head. He sank into a chair at the kitchen table, his head in his hands. I could see the decades of his life as a cop warring with his love for his son. The denial, the anger, the bargaining, the despair. I saw it all flash across his face in a matter of seconds. "What do we do?" he finally asked, his voice a broken rasp. It was the question I had been dreading. The we. He was pulling me in, asking me not as Frank the janitor, but as Detective Miller, his partner. He was asking me to fix it. "You talk to him," I said, my voice firm. "You get the names of the other boys from him, and you make this right. You go to the school, you offer to pay for every cent of the damages, and then some. You have those boys scrub every last speck of paint off those walls themselves. You make them understand what they did." He looked up at me, a flicker of hope in his eyes. "And the police? If you do all that," I said, choosing my words carefully, "if you show genuine remorse and make full restitution before the school files a formal complaint, maybe Principal Thompson will be lenient. Maybe he'll see it as a severe disciplinary issue instead of a felony." It was a lie, or at least a half-truth. The police were already involved, a report was already filed. But Dave didn't need to know that just yet. He needed a path forward, a way to salvage this. I was giving him a chance to get ahead of the storm, to mitigate the damage. He nodded slowly, grabbing onto the lifeline I had thrown him. "Okay," he said, standing up. "Okay, I'll talk to him. He's still sleeping. I'll handle it. Thank you, Frank." I left him there, standing amidst the shards of his coffee mug and his perfect life. The drive back to my small apartment was the longest of my life. I had betrayed my oath as an officer by not going straight to the police, but I had tried to honor my friendship to Dave. I hoped it was the right call. Later that evening, my phone rang. It was an anonymous number. I answered. "Hello?" "Stay out of it," a young male voice hissed. It was Kyle. "My dad told me what you said. You're a liar. You didn't see anything. If you know what's good for you, you'll keep your mouth shut, old man." Before I could reply, he hung up. The line went dead. The kid wasn't remorseful. He was defiant. He was threatening a witness. He had learned nothing, and in that moment I knew Dave's intervention had failed. The next morning I walked into the school and saw the cleaning crews Principal Thompson had hired. They were already painting over the graffiti. I felt a knot of dread tighten in my stomach. They were painting over the evidence, wiping it away. I walked closer to the main wall in the arts wing, where the worst of the damage had been. The new paint was still wet, but under the bright industrial lights I could see it, faintly, ghost-like, showing through the single, hurried coat of cheap primer they'd used were the outlines of the graffiti. It was still there. And then I saw something else. Something that made my blood freeze. It wasn't just the kids' tags. There, in the middle of it all, sprayed in the same red paint, was a single symbol I hadn't noticed in the dark. A symbol I knew all too well from my old life. It was the calling card of a local gang, one known for violence, theft, and intimidation. This wasn't just teenage vandalism. Kyle was in much deeper trouble than even his father could imagine. That symbol changed everything. It was a stylized wolf's head, the mark of the Vargos, a street gang that had been a persistent thorn in my side for the last 5 years of my career. They weren't kids playing gangster. They were into drug running and extortion. And Kyle Markinson, captain of the lacrosse team, son of a decorated cop, was tagging walls with their sign. This wasn't a prank gone wrong. This was a message. Or worse, an initiation. My loyalty to Dave was a heavyweight, but the safety of the kids in this school was heavier. Kyle's threat on the phone, his utter lack of remorse, and now this. He had crossed a line. My path was clear again. I went straight to Principal Thompson's office. I didn't tell him I was a retired detective, but I told him everything else. I described the boys, their clothing, their actions, the selfie. I told him about the expensive beer and the custom guitar pick. I gave him every piece of evidence I had gathered. I left out Kyle's name for now. I simply gave him the tools. The police have the beer can and the shoe prints, I finished, but I think your cleaning crew might be covering up something important. There was a symbol on the main wall, and I don't think it was just random. To his credit, Thompson listened intently. He was a good man who cared deeply about his school. He immediately got on the phone with Officer Davis, relaying my information with a new sense of urgency. I could hear the change in his tone as he told them to halt the cleanup and get a proper forensics team to the arts wing. The wheels of justice, the ones I knew so well, began to turn. I went back to my duties, the familiar squeak of my cart now a comforting metronome counting down the seconds until this was over. I knew it wouldn't be long. With the evidence I'd preserved and the new leads I'd provided, the local PD would connect the dots fast. The guitar pick with the initials JB would lead them to Josh Bell. The skate shoes with the green laces, the tire tracks from a specific SUV, the selfie that was undoubtedly still on Kyle's phone, they were caught. It was just a matter of time. The call came 2 days later. It was Dave. His voice was hollow, stripped of all its usual bravado. They arrested him, he said. No preamble. They arrested Kyle at school, and Josh Bell. 2 other boys from the team, too. They found the spray cans and the masks in the back of Kyle's truck. It's all over, Frank. I'm sorry, Dave, I said, and I meant it. Don't be, he replied, a bitter edge to his voice. He lied to my face, said you were a crazy old man making things up, said he was at a movie. He didn't just vandalize a school, Frank. He tried to join a gang. His voice broke. The Vagos. They told him if he did something big, something to get his name in the papers, they'd let him in. He wanted to be a tough guy. My son. My stupid, stupid son. The story came tumbling out. Kyle had fallen in with a bad crowd, got into debt over pills, and saw the Vargos as a way out. The vandalism was his audition. He thought his father's reputation and money would make him untouchable. It was a classic story of a privileged kid trying to prove himself in the worst way possible. I met Dave for coffee that weekend. He looked like he'd aged 10 years. We sat in a booth, the silence thick between us. You did the right thing, he finally said, staring into his cup. You were a better cop as a janitor than I was as a father. I was blind. I didn't want to see it. He's a kid, Dave. Kids do dumb things. This wasn't just dumb, he said, shaking his head. This was dangerous. You didn't just catch a vandal, Frank. You probably saved his life." And he was right. Kyle and his friends were facing felony charges, but because they were minors and had clean records, the district attorney, with some pressure from a humble Dave Markinson, agreed to a deal. They wouldn't serve jail time. Instead, they were sentenced to a year of probation, mandatory drug counseling, and 500 hours of community service. And by a stroke of poetic justice, I couldn't help but appreciate, Principal Thompson arranged for their community service to be fulfilled at the school. For the next 6 months, I had 4 new assistants. Every day after school, Kyle, Josh, and the other 2 boys would report to me. They didn't wear hoodies and ski masks anymore. They wore orange vests that read, "Community Service." Under my watchful eye, they scraped gum from under desks. They scrubbed toilets. They repainted the walls they had defaced, this time with a meticulous attention to detail they hadn't possessed before. Kyle avoided my gaze for the first month. He was sullen, angry, and humiliated. I never mentioned the incident. I just gave him his tasks for the day. "Markinson, the gym floor needs buffing. Bell, you're on cafeteria duty." I was his boss, not his friend or his father's old partner. Slowly, very slowly, I saw a change. The arrogant swagger was replaced by a quiet diligence. He learned the rhythm of the work, the satisfaction of a job well done. He saw the effort it took to keep the place running, the place he had tried so carelessly to destroy. One evening, near the end of his service, we were emptying the last of the trash bins by the soccer field. "Mr. Miller," he said, the first time he'd ever initiated a conversation with me. "It's Frank," I said. "Frank," he corrected himself. I just wanted to say thank you." I stopped and looked at him. The smug kid from the selfie was gone. In his place was a young man with exhaustion and a flicker of genuine remorse in his eyes. "For what?" I asked. "For catching me," he said, his voice quiet. "I was an idiot. I was going down a really bad road. If you hadn't, I don't know where I'd be right now. Probably in a lot more trouble than scrubbing floors." I just nodded, and we finished our work in silence. My sanctuary was quiet again. The hallways were clean, the display cases were repaired, and new student artwork adorned the walls. The squeak of my cart's wheels was once again a peaceful, solitary sound. I was just Frank, the night janitor. And for the first time in a long time, that was more than enough.